distinguished industry leaders, colleagues in the state cabinet, and esteemed guests. I think koncham Telugu, koncham English, I think I'll go together. Because target audience is just not some of the people present here. But I'd like to take this message all across the state of Andhra Pradesh. So a little bit of a mix and balance between English and Telugu would be the pitch that I would be taking. I'm happy to welcome you all to the Vision Visakha program. In fact, today all of us are gathered here to discuss about what Vishakhapatnam means to all. Why does the state need Vishakhapatnam? It's indeed a fact. Post bifurcation, the successor state, that is the current state of Andhra Pradesh, has rendered a more an agrarian one. In fact, if one were to compare the figures of what the average contribution of primary sector into GSDP were to be at the national level when compared to the agriculture sector, we would come across a figure of 17 to 18% at the national level. Whereas when it comes to our state, we're talking about a figure of 35%. On one side, it is a projection that we are an agrarian state. But on the other side, it poses a challenge that no state can survive with these numbers until and unless the secondary and the tertiary sectors grow. And the contribution of the primary sector, that the agriculture sector, comes down. That means the growth should take place in such a way that the secondary sector and the tertiary sector continues to grow in a much faster pace than the agriculture sector. Only then we would be in a position to address the challenges that are posed. Only then you would see better growth rates. Only then you would see a situation where you can talk about economic boost. In fact, so much so is the challenge posed by the bifurcation that in fact we have lost out on Hyderabad. Now why is it that Hyderabad is so very important to us? And why is it that we losing Hyderabad has an impact on the state? Every state, for it to progress, you need to have an economic engine. And that economic engine, for decades, to our erstwhile state, was Hyderabad. In fact, to give a perspective, the central government those days used the public sector as the main vehicle to stimulate economic growth. In fact, if we were to see the institutions such as IDPL, NMDC, NFC, IICT, and so forth, they were all set up in Hyderabad. Because of the fact that public sector undertakings, these huge investments, came up in Hyderabad, Hyderabad as an area grew beyond any other place in the state. That is the reason why, in fact, once these kind of institutions come up, then automatically it leads to a transformation, leads to better salaried employees coming out of that location, coming out of that place, which in turn leads to a cyclic effect where better institutions would come up, overall economic growth takes place, and then the city starts moving and growing. Unfortunately for us, it so happened that 90% of the entire PSUs which were allocated to the erstwhile state of Andhra Pradesh have all come up only in Hyderabad. And because of that, Hyderabad grew at a much faster pace than any other place in the state. In fact, so much so that the services sector in Telangana, for instance, is now currently positioned at a 62.87%, the tertiary sector, whereas the national average is 55%. And in the tertiary sector, state of Andhra Pradesh, we stand at mere 40%. So the agriculture sector, what should be at 17% as a national average, we are at 35%. The services sector, which is the tertiary sector, which should have actually been at 55%, which is the national average, we are at 40%, whereas Telangana is at 62.87% of the state's GSDP comes from just the services sector, that is the tertiary sector, and predominantly from Hyderabad. So until and unless you have a similar kind of situation also boost the Andhra Pradesh's economy, we will never see the rise of the services sector. It's only the manufacturing sector that is, we are on par with the national average, which is 25%, which is the secondary sector. But there is a huge thrust that should be put in the tertiary sector, which should grow leaps and bounds, which is the services sector. And our dependence on agriculture gradually should come down, per se not meaning to say that the growth should come down. The growth in agriculture sector is per se not much. You do not see the kind of numbers what you see in the services sector. So it's very important for any particular state to grow. It's very important that the secondary sector, that is the services sector, that is the tertiary sector, should grow leaps and bounds. In fact, owing to this reason, the per capita income of Andhra Pradesh, if one were to compare with Telangana, is only 2,19,518. When compared to the figures of those in Telangana, you would see 3,12,398 for the year 2022-23. This is the per capita income. Predominantly it is coming from Hyderabad. The reason why I'm saying this is, we would have to have a balanced growth. We would have to harness the strengths that we have. We have a huge coastline of our second largest coastline, in fact, in the country. 974 kilometers of coastline. Now, this is one potential that we need to harness to ensure that we have an economy which is port-led economy, which would support the manufacturing side. While we support the manufacturing side through port-led development, developing our 974-kilometer coastline with various nodes, industrial nodes coming up closer to the ports. While we do so, we also need to strengthen our services sector, developing Vishakhapatnam, developing Vizag. It's got to be a mix of both. Only then we would see this kind of growth rate. In fact, to do so, we have, in fact, the state of Andhra Pradesh, before 2019, that is before our regime had come in, the state of Andhra Pradesh had 6 ports in 4 locations. Now in this 5 years of regime, we're actually in a very advanced stage of constructing 4 more ports. In fact, at a rapid pace, the construction of the ports is going on. In fact, 16,000 and odd crores of investment is going in. We've already incurred more than close to 4,000 crores of this investment. And Ramaiapatnam is one particular port where, in fact, my people are saying that going forward next month, you would actually see a ship coming into the port. So much so has been the progress. And similar progress one can also see if one were to visit these ports, be it Ramaiapatnam port, which is going at a massive pace, be it the Machilipatnam port, which is also progressing at a very, very brisk pace. So is the progress in Kakinada also. It's a private port though, Kakinada being. And then the Mulapeta port coming up in Srikakulam is also moving at a very, very brisk pace. So 3 of them are coming up in government sector, 1 of them is coming up in the private sector. All 4 are moving in a very, very brisk pace. So what we're currently doing is developing what we had 6 ports earlier in 4 locations, we're developing 4 more. And then we're building 10 fishing harbors to support blue economy. We now currently have every 50 kilometers one travels through the coast. Every 50 kilometers you would either see a fishing harbor which is being constructed or a port which is in existence or one being constructed. So every 50 kilometers per se you actually have a booster for the economy currently in the state available. We're also building 6 fish landing centers as well. And then there is a lot of focus on greenfield electronics manufacturing cluster, development of nodes which is taking place. This greenfield electronics manufacturing cluster is coming up at Koparthi and YSR district, and industrial parks in Achutapuram, Orvakallu and Krishnapatnam. These are all some of the several steps taken by the state government to ensure that development is more balanced across the state. In fact, as I've said, as I've been speaking, such is the proactive nature of the government and such is the conducive business-friendly environment prevalent in the state that consistently for the past 3 years in the category of ease of doing business, the state is rated number 1. This is one major achievement that the state can boast about, trying to showcase that we per se are very friendly to industrialists. Now, having said that, it has attracted almost 13 lakh crores in the Global Investors Summit, which we concluded last year. 352 MOUs were signed, an employment potential of close to 6 lakhs. And at a brisk pace, these MOUs are being translated into reality. In fact, out of 352 MOUs that we have actually signed, in fact, 39% of these MOUs have actually translated into actual commissioning of the plants. So at a brisk pace, these things are happening, and we have also, the economy per se, if one were to look at it, just doesn't come with only the elite or the aloof or the big manufacturing sector alone coming up. It's got to be a mix of everything. In fact, so much so that I would say that the state government has implemented in these 5 years several welfare programs orienting them towards sustainable self-employment. In fact, every scheme of the state government, if one were to notice the schemes, especially the welfare schemes, one would be surprised to see what kind of a transformational bearing these schemes have. To begin with, everything is DBT, direct benefit transfer, where there's no middleman in between, where everything is transparent and there's no corruption there. Now, having said that, every scheme is hand-holding women. So much so that every scheme is translating. Say, for instance, I speak about Cheyuta as one particular scheme. The scheme actually narrates hand-holding women, the same particular woman, consistently for 4 years, every year giving 18,750 rupees for the same woman. So in 4 years' time, you actually handhold the same woman, giving every year 18,750 to the same women. While we are doing that, we ensured that there is a bank tie-up also coming into picture. We've also ensured that big companies, starting from Amul to ITC, to Reliance, to Procter & Gamble, to such kind of big companies also partnering with these women in sharing opportunities, in showing them livelihood opportunities. So it's a mix of state government supporting the same women so that these women stand on their feet. Likewise, if one were to see every scheme that the state government has been undertaking in these 5 years, every scheme is a combination of livelihood opportunities, either provided to strengthen the current existing livelihood opportunities or to create new ones. In fact, if one were to actually look at how the employment cycle goes, most of the employment cycle doesn't come from government employment. Government employment per se, before we had come in, probably we had 4 lakh jobs in government sector. And probably our government, being very proactive in actually providing for jobs, could actually create another 2 lakh jobs, which is actually very high. Before we had come in, we had 4 lakhs for decades. And after we had come in, we actually created 50% more jobs in government sector. But that is where it can end. It cannot go beyond that. You're talking about 4 lakhs being to 6 lakhs. Then per se, the big industrialists also, when we were to speak of, if one were to see the translation of opportunities of jobs actually created per se for investment that is actually put in, would probably translate to probably 1 crore of investment translating into one particular job. Not much. Maybe adding to another 2 or 3 lakhs, not beyond that. The major contribution comes from 3 other sectors. One is agriculture, which actually constitutes 62% of the workforce. Now what we have done is support agriculture, where in fact the best part in agriculture is, the challenging part in agriculture is, even though the fact still remains that 62% of the population depend on agriculture, the fact is 50% of the land holding is less than 1.25 acres, that is half hectare. If if one were to translate this land holding into, for calculation's sake, as to up to 1 hectare, if one were to take into consideration, then you're talking about 70% of the land holding is within 1 hectare. We have very small and marginal farmers, and if these small and marginal farmers do not make money, the economy is shattered. What we could actually do is come up with those initiatives to handhold farmers through RBKs, setting up of Raitu Bharosa Kendras where every village has one, where you have an agricultural graduate sitting in those villages, in those RBKs, where everything from seed to sale of crop is handheld through these RBKs. And with such kind of micromanagement, also incentivizing farmers with production incentives as well, that farming sector could survive. This is one major sector which actually comes to give you a support for the employment. Then the other major sector, which is another sector which actually supports, is MSMEs. MSMEs also, if one were to speak of, talking about if industries, mega industries, big industries constitute maybe 3 lakh, 4 lakh jobs, you're talking about MSMEs which actually constitute more than 30 lakh jobs. There per se, the employability rate is more. Every MSME is small, but yet employs more number of people when conversion ratio takes place from investment perspective. But these 30 lakhs, these 3 lakhs, these 4 lakhs, these are not the numbers. Dominantly self-employed sections. Self-employed sections constitute a primary more than 1.5 crore population, which actually should be doing well for the economy to do well. And through various schemes, various platforms, we've ensured that these self-employed sections are handheld, given support through various schemes. I'll give you an example. Before we had come in, we were talking about self-help groups, which actually constitute more than 1 crore of women. Before we had come in, these self-help groups had an NPA and outstanding loans to the extent of 18%. Today, the same self-help groups, the outstanding loans and the NPAs, if one were to look at in this sector now, it is just 0.3%. And 1 crore of women livelihoods are dependent on that. Same word, if one were to see the same thing, every scheme like Vahana Mitra, which talks about self-employed sections who actually are driving the cabs or actually driving the autos. If economy there fails, the entire state fails. We're talking about barbers. We're talking about so many such self-employed sections running into lakhs and together running into crores, which actually have been supported so as to render phenomenal growth rate. In fact, when we had come in 2018-19, our state was figuring probably the least among the states in growth rate, in GSDP growth rates. The last year numbers, if one were to say, we are figuring in top 5 states in the country. If GSDP growth rate were to be figured in. Similarly, every initiative that we've taken in supporting every sector, the the MSMEs, for instance, our state can boast about that we had ensured that timely MSME incentives were given, even during the times of COVID, that actually protected the MSME sector, so much so that today, the kind of growth that we have seen in MSC sectors was so unprecedented, never so happened in the state of Andhra Pradesh. In fact, the reasons have resulted in the state's manufacturing GVA, when viewed as a percentage of India's manufacturing GVA, increasing to 4% during 2019 to 24 from the corresponding figure of 2.9% during 2014 to 19. That was the previous regime. That is the kind of GVA contribution. State's manufacturing GVA when compared to a percentage of India's manufacturing GVA, if one were to compare. We're actually contributing 4% now versus in the previous regime, contributing to only 2.9% in those days. As I've said, the state's services sector contributes to only 40% of the state's GVA when compared to the national average of 55% and when compared to Telangana's state's average of 63%. Now, this is a position that was occasioned by the state's bifurcation that has deprived Andhra Pradesh of Hyderabad city and the economic benefits associated with it. Now, how do we bring about a change which would actually help boost the state's economy? Now, what do we do about Vizag? Now, how do we boost Vizag's growth story so that ultimately we come across a situation where at least 10 years down the line, starting today, at least we compete with Hyderabad or we compete with Bangalore or we compete with Chennai. So what exactly does Vision Vizag, Vision Visakha mean? So until and unless we think in those terms, until and unless we have passion for this particular place, for this particular city, this vision can never be visualized, can never be obtained, can never be realized. A lot of people, in fact, when I speak of these words, when I say the first thing what anybody should be doing is to come and stay here as a chief minister. If I were to say this, unfortunately we have an opposition in the state, and we also have a lot of vested interests and also a negative media with vested interests who support the opposition. I think many of you also are aware of it, that they make such a hue and cry that, in fact, that we shifting over to Vizag, they try to make an issue out of it, saying that somebody is coming to Vizag because they want to grab the lands here. They want to do that, they want to do that. And these kind of stories shamelessly are written, shamelessly are projected. And all for what? So they don't want the chief minister to come here. They go to the court, court cases are filed. All for what? They don't want chief ministers to come here. Now why? Because if the chief minister comes here, this area will grow. Because there's ownership which is going to come for this area. There will be a christening of the city as executive capital. So they don't want the chief minister to come here because they have vested interests elsewhere. They bought land before the capital could be announced elsewhere. Thousands of acres in private hands, Benami lands. And they're all scared. The moment this becomes the executive capital, the land rates there would further plunge. And because of this Western interest, today, Visakh has taken the beating. So going forward, I'm here to assure everybody here that there would be changes, because this is inevitable. If one were to compete with Hyderabad, compete with Chennai, compete with Bangalore, it's very important that Visakh becomes the economic growth engine. That is, in fact, if I were to have any vested interest, probably I would be speaking about Kadapa. See, for me, the state is ours, to everyone here. And one in my place should think in terms of what is good for the next generation. How would we want our children to be positioned? How are the state's revenues going to be? Where is the growth going to come from? And how exactly can we boost these revenues to support the growth of Andhra Pradesh? If we do not think like this in terms of growth for Visakh, then who would think? If the vision of the leader is wrong, if the vision of the leader is negative, then Visakh will not grow. Today, unfortunately, only person standing for Vishakhapatnam as executive capital is only me. Unfortunately, this is the reality. Fighting against the entire opposition, fighting against vested interests of the media, everybody wanting that Vishakhapatnam is not declared as executive capital. This is the reality. Everybody should keep this in mind, understand this reality. Now moving further, Visakh would have to develop. I'm assuring you, we have court cases going on, we have so many people trying to oppose everything. But I'm assuring you, post-election, my stay would be in Visakh. In fact, my swearing-in ceremony also would be in Visakh. This is my commitment to Visakh. And now, what is the vision for Visakh? See, we need to have a 10-year vision. We would have to own this city, christen the city as executive capital, become part of the city, and have a 10-year vision. We need to have a roadmap which is workable, which is doable. It cannot be a roadmap where we just dream big but yet achieve nothing, because it is impractical. Not so. We need to have a practical solution, we need to have a practical approach, and we need to have a vision which is realizable in 10 years' time. Of course, this vision is one vision which cannot be alone done by the state government. It would have to be the state government, it would have to be the central government, it would have to be a PPP model, it would have to be encouraging private people also to become part of the vision. All these people become part of this vision, only then we can realize Vizag is the next competitor in a decade's time to Hyderabad, Bangalore or Chennai. In fact, why I was opposed to the idea of having Amaravati as a capital. There is nothing against it. In fact, I am one person who advocates the view that Amaravati should also have a legislative capital. And in fact, I am also one person who advocates the view that Kurnool should also have a judicial capital. Nothing against it. But then, the fact of the matter is, Amaravati is on a virgin land. 50,000 acres of barren land. Nothing there. And according to them, just to provide for the basic infrastructure, that is these roads, the water, electricity, and these kind of basic infrastructure alone, according to their own calculations, with the DPR that they have produced, costs almost 2 crores per acre, which is on a 50,000 acres of barren land. If one were to just lay these basic infrastructure requirements put in place, we're talking about 1 lakh investments, 1 lakh crores of money, which would have to be put in before any buildings could come up or before we could talk about anything else other than the basic roads or the basic electricity or the basic water or the basic stuff. Now per se, does anybody have 1 lakh crores to be pumped in? And if this 1 lakh crores were to be pumped in today, it's going to cost 1 lakh crores. But if this 1 lakh crores would be pumped in maybe in 20 years' time, presuming 5,000 crores of outlay every year, approximately, what one could actually probably afford. So there's nothing there. Then you're talking about 20 years. Then in 20 years' time, 1 lakh crore probably would become 7-8 lakhs or 10 lakh crores. The expenditure what you thought about as 1 lakh crores today, in 20 years would actually be 10 lakhs, 15 lakhs. Probably the net present value calculations of probably 1 lakh crores 20 years down the line would probably be one were to calculate 1 lakh crores today, 20 years down it would be 10 lakhs, 15 lakhs, 20 lakh crores. And which is going to be a dream chasing. You would never be anywhere. That is the reason why I say I'm nothing against it. It's only something that we can't do it. Whereas here in Vizag, we have a place which already has this basic infrastructure put in place. We already have roads. We already have good roads. We already have electricity, good electricity. We have good water connections. We have good everything. Basic infrastructure is already put in place. So all what we need to do is, given that finishing touches, just give it a little bit of finishing touches, and it would transform into something much, much, much bigger. And what are those finishing touches that we need to give? An iconic secretariat. The moment we shift here and christen it as executive capital, you obviously would have the entire employees also come and station here, for which a secretariat building. Why construct an ordinary secretariat building? Construct something iconic, which would stand out, which would attract the entire country to see. An iconic secretariat, an iconic convention center. People talk about one of Geo Convention Center. The latest, the biggest, the best. These are the names that they give. Here we have something like that. Not much of a cost. Why can't we have one here so that the entire world, entire country looks up? Iconic stadium. There's one in Hyderabad. Investment is probably 800 crores, 1,000 crores. Not much of an investment. But the entire country talks about it. Entire country talks about that stadium. And whensoever a match is played between the countries, that stadium is glorified. It is spoken about by the entire country. Entire world sees that stadium. All these that I speak about are iconic. All these, if they were to be commissioned, would actually pitch Vizag on the global scale, would draw eyeballs not only of the country but the whole world to actually look at Vizag. What we have envisioned for Vizag, iconic secretariat, iconic convention center, iconic stadium, Institute of Emerging Technologies. One beautiful institute wherein the talent for any emerging technologies is tutored here. If our students could be given that kind of skills, tutored here, this would be positioned as something else. We have the Bhogapuram International Airport coming up. At a very brisk pace, the work is happening. And within the next 15 months or 18 months, this project would actually see the light of the day. It's moving at a very brisk pace. Then connectivity to the Bhogapuram International Airport. A 6-lane beach corridor road with beautiful green lawns on either side of the roads. 6-lane road to Bhogapuram International Airport. They're talking about a metro rail. Our Vizag is probably the only metro, I guess, which does not have a metro rail. So getting funds for metro rail per se, I don't think it's that difficult. Because it might cost another 14,000 crores. But 60% of the funding comes in PPP model by the developer. Another 40% is to be shared by central and the state government. Central shares 20%, state shares 20% of the 14,000 crore investment. Of course, we are pushing for the entire 40% to be borne by the central government. That's a different story. But even if that doesn't happen, we're still talking about 20% contribution from the state government. And then you could actually see a 14,000 crore metro rail project also take off. Then we're building a Molapet port in Srikakulam. Within the next 1 year, the Molapet port would actually start functioning. And we have Vizag, Bhogapuram International Airport, which is 30 kilometers from the airport. And then from there, the Molapet port is just another 110 kilometers or so. So you have entire corridor from Vizag International Airport and then Molapet port. A horizontal growth corridor which could take off, which already has an existing national highway, I think 6-lane or 8-lane highway. It's already, the works are at a brisk pace. Then you have a data center with a submarine cable which is coming from Singapore. A data center, Adani is doing it. A huge investment, 27,000 crores of investment is coming there. And since it's a private investment, and Adani is doing it, the works of the land from our side, everything that needs to be done is already done. They've already started the work, the plans are submitted. And within the next 5-6 years, in a staggered way, in a phased manner, they would actually ensure that this project also comes up. Then you have hospitality industry, which also needs to be looked into, which also needs to be given a little bit of boost, for which we have ensured that Oberoi and Mayfair groups are given certain bits of land for them to develop 5-star plus resorts here as well in Vizag, where Vizag is short and it doesn't have resorts. It has some good hotels, but it doesn't have resorts. So this 5-star plus category resorts by Oberoi or Mayfair would actually bridge in that gap. The land has already been given to these private people and they're already on the verge of starting the construction, and within the next 2 years or so you would actually start them, you would actually see them commissioned. Then NTPC Green Hydrogen Project. This is also around about 30,000 crore investment of NTPC. This project, fortunately yesterday Prime Minister virtually laid the foundation stone. So this is also going to be a reality. So all these that I just spoke about, they are not things that cannot be achieved. All these things can be realizable. Within the next 10 years, in a staggered manner, we would see all these things coming up. Because all these things that I spoke about are not big. Something which is unimaginable. No, not so. All these things are realizable because they're not something, they do not post those numbers which would actually say they are not realizable. And there is of course one aspiration what I'm trying to negotiate with the Prime Minister also. This thing goes well, we would have this as well. A high-speed rail corridor from Hyderabad to Vizag, passing through Vijayawada. And then Vijayawada to Bangalore, passing through Kurnool and Kadapa. But this is an aspiration. If it happens, it happens. Even if it doesn't happen, 10 years is a big enough span for us to pursue that it happens. Even though this is an aspiration currently with us, the rest of the stuff that I spoke about are all realizable. So with all these things coming up in Vizag, and the Chief Minister coming and stationed in Vizag, it would attract a lot of people to come and settle down in Vizag as well. And Vizag in 10 years' time, with all these iconic buildings taking shape, would actually compete with the best in the world, with the best in India, definitely for sure. In fact, my people have gone ahead and given a presentation to this effect. We can all watch, myself included. I'll also be sitting with you on the other side. Let's share the officials also for actually putting in this kind of energy and effort, because it takes a lot of passion to actually be involved. What needs to be done for Vizag? How do we do it? And it takes a lot of passion. And, in fact, when I was asked to come here, I said, fine. Because looking at their passion, I wanted to encourage them as well. And I also wanted to give a kind of confidence to the people of Vizag in particular, that yes, Vizag, in spite of all the difficulties and hurdles that were posed, we will prevail, we will survive, and we will bounce back, is what the final message would be. Thank you all for this patient hearing. I hope that we all share this dream and it will be realized at the earliest. Thank you.